Welcome back to my channel where today I'm going to be analysing every Premier League team and discussing who I think their player of the season should be. Now, it's just my opinion and I'm not a fan of any of the teams. I just love watching football and the Premier League. So if you are watching this and you are a fan of one of these Premier League teams or you're just a fan of football in general, leave in the comments below who you think your player of the season is for each Premier League team or perhaps just the team that you support. If you like the video, please like, comment and subscribe. I would really appreciate that. So, let's begin by looking at the team at the bottom of the league, and that is, of course, Norwich. Again, they have flopped this season in the Premier League. I think Pukki's probably their player of the season just because he's their top goal scorer and no one really else from Norwich stood out. I think most of their signings didn't do very well, aside from perhaps Norman. Now, they've got a couple of really good players in the likes of young players, I should say, in the likes of Omobamidele, Rowe, Adamida, and then Max Aarons. You could potentially consider he's still a young player, but it has been a really bad season for Norwich. However, their fans will probably be thinking that the new investment that's coming in from American people will be really, really good for them, and it's probably needed because they just haven't been competing in the Premier League when they've been promoted. So, next team, Watford, they've had a really, really bad season, and I would actually say their player of the season is probably Camara, the left back, because since he's come in January, he's been excellent and absolutely their standout player of the season. Maybe you can argue the likes of Dennis, perhaps even Kuchka, have been potentially up there with their player of the season, but Watford have had such a poor season, and Camara has had such a massive impact. I'd probably say he's been their player of the season. Then we have Burnley. Now, Burnley, of course, after spending 6 years in the Premier League, are now relegated because of the financial issues, given that the American owners that came in halfway through the season had to take out a £65 million loan, and that's now got to be repaid. I think Burnley are going to have somewhat of a fire sale, so a lot of their best players will leave. You know, the likes of Cornet, Brownhill's been very consistent, and James Tarkowski at times, but for me it's Nick Pope. I think Nick Pope's been their player of the season, and I'll be stunned if he's still at Burnley next season. Then we have Leeds. Now, Leeds have had a pretty poor season. I think a lot of people expected them to finish lower than 9th, but maybe not this low in 17th. I would say that Rafinha's probably been their standout player. Then we have Everton. Now, they almost got relegated. It was very, very close. And isn't it weird how, you know, just even from last season, they had Carlo Ancelotti as manager, and now he's won the Champions League with Real Madrid. But yeah, Everton, with Frank Lampard in charge, they haven't had a very good season. Anthony Gordon's been very good in his first proper Premier League campaign, but I would say Pickford's probably been their player of the season. Saints. Now, Saints were very good for most of the season, but right up until March, basically from March until the end of the season, they've arguably been one of the worst teams in the Premier League, and that means they've collapsed all the way to 15th. I think their player of the season is James Ward-Prowse, but also Livramento and Kyle Walker-Peters have both been very good. Basically right up until that kind of March point where the whole Saints team have collapsed, aside from maybe someone like James Ward-Prowse. Aston Villa. Now, I don't think there's been too many standout players for Aston Villa. I probably would give it to Matty Cash because he's probably been the most consistent player for Aston Villa. However, I think Aston Villa fans will be maybe relatively disappointed in their season because they've spent a lot of money, and against teams in the top half of the Premier League table, they've been really poor. Now, they've already made a lot of investments in, I think, Camara from Marseille and also Diego Carlos, and then potentially rumours of bringing in Suarez. I think one of the reasons why Villa are bringing all these different players who are kind of in their late 20s is because they know that they're only going to have Gerrard for a few more years, so they really want to try and push as high up as they can. Having said that, though, they've still got a lot of great young players in the likes of Camara, Cash, Keenan Davis even, and Ramsey as well. But for Palace, I probably would say for this season, their player of the season has probably been Matty Cash. For Brentford, now I think Ivan Toney and David Raya have both been really consistent, but it's hard to ignore the impact of Christian Eriksen that he's had on the team. In 9 games that he's played, Brentford have won 7 of them. So it just shows the significant impact that Eriksen has had. And I think Brentford's recruitment's really good. So I think they'll probably stay up next season. However, most likely Eriksen and Ivan Toney will both leave, and I think Brentford will really struggle to replace both of them, especially Eriksen. Palace. I think Gallagher's been their player of the season. I will say that he has dropped off from the back end of 2022, sorry. I still think, though, the impact he had in the first half of the season, and generally speaking on the whole team, even in the second half, without goals or assists, I would say that Gallagher's been their player of the season. However, Palace's recruitment has been excellent. Mark Guehi and Joachim Andersen have both been fantastic in defence, as has Tyreek Mitchell, the academy player at left back. So Palace deserve a lot of credit. Their recruitment's been excellent, and I think they'll kick on and finish higher than 12th because you've got those young players in defence, but then also going forward, Michael Olise is fantastic, and Jean-Philippe Mateta as well is a really solid striker. Newcastle, I think this has been, statistically it has, it's been the best turnaround from any Premier League team in Premier League history. From the first 18 games to the next 18 games, it's been phenomenal. I would say their player of the season actually being Joel Linton, because Callum Wilson, he was a little bit injured in the second half of the season. St. Maximin's just a little bit too inconsistent for me. No one's really stood out in defence. Maybe Kieran Trippier perhaps, but again, he was injured, similar to Callum Wilson. So I'd actually give it to Joel Linton. The way that he's been transformed by Eddie Howe from a striker to a box-to-box midfielder has been brilliant. So fair play, Joel Linton. He deserves a lot of credit. Wolves in 10th. Now, despite Wolves' relatively high finish, I think they've got a lot to worry about next season because their recruitment's a little bit erratic and they've also got a lot of change coming up. I think lots of old guard in Neves will probably leave. Roman Saiz is confirmed leaving as well. Perhaps even Jimenez will leave. Matinho potentially as well. Bolly, he's not getting any younger. So Wolves have got a lot of worries and concerns, problems to think about. However, for this particular season, I think their player of the season is Jose Sarr. What a phenomenal signing he's been. I mean, he was brought in as a replacement for Rui Patricio, but he's arguably better. Brilliant signing from Wolves. He's definitely been their player of the season. For Brighton, what a phenomenal, brilliant season they've had as a team. Fantastic recruitment. They play great football. They've got a really good manager. Fair play, Brighton. For me, their player of the season's been their new Spanish signing, Cucurella, who predominantly played at left-back, but has also, in recent weeks, played as a left centre-back. But also, shout out Basuma and Trossard. Then we have Leicester at 8th. I don't think too many players have stood out for them, and it's been quite a conflicting, confusing season for them. A very mixed season. But for me, you'd probably say that their standout player has been James Maddison. Maybe Kieran Dewsbury Hall potentially, but he's only performing really well from December onwards, whereas Maddison has had a more consistent season. So I would give player of the season to Maddison. For West Ham, again, similar to Brighton, phenomenal season, not just in the Premier League, because for so long in this season, they were right up there competing for the top 4. But then, of course, in Europe as well, they went on a fantastic run. And it's easy to forget, they beat Man City in the League Cup on penalties. Some people might argue that it's a little bit lucky, but they got to penalties in the League Cup and they beat Man City. You can't take that away from them. Fantastic season for West Ham. Surely their player of the season is Jarrod Bowen, and a deserved England call-up for him, but also shout out Declan Rice. And for what it's worth, I do think Declan Rice will stay for one more season at West Ham. For Man United, a terrible, horrific season. Only 2 players have really stood out for them, and that's Ronaldo and De Gea. I probably would lean towards Ronaldo just because his impact in the Champions League was really important for Man United, especially in the group stage. But then also in the league, without some of his goals and a couple of his hat-tricks against Tottenham and Norwich, you definitely think that they'd finish below West Ham in the Europa Conference League and then potentially lower than the likes of Leicester and Brighton. So I would say Ronaldo's been their player of the season. Should he stay though? That's another different question. For me personally, I think just because of his commercial value and his goals that he can still contribute to the team. But yeah, he's definitely been their player of the season in what has been a horrific season for Man United. For Arsenal, you've got a number of different young players that have stood out. The likes of Saka, Odegaard, Ben White, Gabriel, Kieran Tierney perhaps. For me, I would give it to Saka just because of his goals and assists have been really important for Arsenal. But also Odegaard is a Rolls Royce of a player. I really like watching him play. He's been fantastic as well for Arsenal. But for me, their player of the season is probably Saka. For Tottenham, what an impact Conte's had. At the start of the season, you had Nuno in there, who always looked like a mismatch. It's not that he's a bad manager, just the fact that Tottenham appointed him so late in pre-season, and he always just seemed like the seventh choice. It was never really going to work out for Nuno. So they brought in Antonio Conte, and he's had a fantastic impact. January as well was a massive month for them, bringing in Bentancur and Kuvalevski, both from Juventus. For me, though, their player of the season has to be Heung-min Son. He's won the Golden Boot, he's got a lot of assists as well, and also, none of his goals have been penalties. So that you have to give Heung-min Son a lot of credit for that, and he's such a brilliant player to watch. So he's definitely been Spurs' player of the season. For Chelsea, I would probably say Antonio Rudiger. Now, some rival fans might say, oh, there's a three at the back tax, because Rudiger, if he's only playing with one centre-back, he looks worse defensively. And maybe that is the case, but purely on this season, he's been phenomenal defensively. But also going forward, he does chip in with the odd goal here and there, not just through set pieces, but through those crazy long-range shots. I remember he had a long-range shot against Burnley that almost went in, and then of course he scored from like 35 yards out against Brentford. So I think Rudiger has been Chelsea's player of the season, but also shout out Mason Mount, who's got double goals and assists. Then it's Liverpool. They've had a number of players who've had brilliant seasons, of course, given that they've won the League Cup, FA Cup, and reached the Champions League final, and then almost beat Man City to the title. But it has to be Salah, right? Not just the fact of his goals and assists, which are the most in the league, but he's got the highest expected goals and assists as well, which shows statistically he deserves to win the Golden Boot and the Playmaker Award in the Premier League. Finally, for Man City, a brilliant season they've had, yet again winning the Premier League. That's 4 Premier League titles in the last 5 years. You've got a number of different players who could potentially win their Player of the Season award. Now, on the BBC Sport website, Kevin De Bruyne won it by a landslide. For me, I don't think it's necessarily that clear-cut and obvious, because you've had Mahrez, who has been incredible in the Champions League, De Bruyne as well, to be fair, and then the likes of, well, potentially Edison, just keeping loads of clean sheets, and Rodri, who's a brilliant player. For me, though, I would probably give it to João Cancelo. He's kept so many clean sheets for Man City, but also has contributed to 8 goal contributions. He's so important for the way Man City build up their attacks on the left-hand side, and it's easy to forget that he's not even a natural left-back. So João Cancelo, I would give it to him, just because of his phenomenal impact and the fact that Man City haven't really missed that left-sided left-back, because João Cancelo has done such an amazing job there. So they're my player of the seasons for each Premier League team. Let me know who you would choose for any one of these Premier League clubs in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please like, comment and subscribe, and I'll see you all soon. Take care.